you need to try to get there like actively and like push your way there, but just doing what you're doing, being in that moment, motivated in that thing, has led you to these really cool, you know, kind of outcomes,
Mm-hmm.
which again, I'm sure you approach them as like the same way you approach this conversation. I wouldn't.
Yeah, that's the thing actually. So, and it's it's deeply rooted in Zen philosophy itself. Like in Zen, there is that idea that everything is sacred. I think we talked about that last time.
Yes.
Everything is sacred, and we also say that everything has the Buddha nature. So the Buddha nature is actually, there's nothing metaphysical about it. It just means that
Okay.
everything is pure in its original state, let's say. So a rock is a beautiful rock, and a tree is a beautiful tree, and we have different trees, we have different rocks. It's the same thing for people. And if you are really in your pure state, let's say, there is no conflict because you're not trying to be someone else. That creates a sort of tension. And the other sort of tension is possibly when you think you're inferior to someone else, let's say. That's another sort of tension. So if you're really in your pure nature and you're different, but at the same time you're connected with everything else, so you just blossom and everything is just simple. And now the thing is, we still need to have like aims because we human beings, we need to be guided by values or aims or objectives. So but they can be very universal ones. Like for example, for me, I just want to be a better human being every day, let's say. So that's very global. It's not selfish. And I do treat everything as sacred. And it doesn't always work out because what I've noticed is in my lifespan is that some people misinterpret that. Say, okay, why is he like this to me? Maybe he wants something. Maybe the intention is not right. People have a divisive mind. So I've came across such people also. Maybe they don't understand it, or maybe they stop having too many expectations from me because they think, trying to create that sort of bond. But it's true, man. But the problem with not having that sort of attitude is you start to create like tribes. Like this person is from my group. This person is different from me, So you start to create that division. But if you treat everything as your own, it's beautiful actually.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the people kind of looking at you and wondering, if there's ulterior motives or something like that, I feel like that goes back to a big thing that I found is very useful in any relationship. I've learned it from Sophia, and we try to both keep it in mind as well as we can. But the idea of other people basically often being a mirror of you, of like a reflection of your own self. So the people who think like, oh, he must have an ulterior motive, stuff like that, they're probably because they actually would be the kind of people who would have an ulterior motive. And so they're assuming that everyone else they interact with is the same as them. We just seem to have this tendency that to want to think other people think and act and, have the same values or underlying, mental or emotional, spiritual structure as us. And I think that what we spoke about having like this reflective mind is such a powerful thing. That's something I want to take away from this and start to practice more of just reflect without trying to come to a conclusion, without trying to be like, okay, I'm going to know something or I'm going to figure something out. Just look at situations like, oh, interesting. Okay. Oh, I wonder what this person is thinking. I don't know, like kind of come from that place. Maybe I can speculate or maybe I can ask and, explore it, but I don't need to have a definitive answer. And even if I think something is true, to know like, hey, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. I feel like that's such a powerful mindset to have. And especially, I would love to be able to turn that towards myself. So when I have an idea or a thought or I'm feeling a certain way, to just be reflective about it. Oh, okay, I'm feeling this way. Interesting, interesting. I wonder what that's about, oh, okay, maybe it's because of this. Okay, is that true? It could be, like try to have a level of detachment or maybe objectivity, if that's possible, to be able to look at myself from like a very more like a third person perspective and be more reflective about things I'm going through instead of just seeing them from a smaller perspective from just where I am just looking out. So it's interesting because I feel like that would actually end up being much more motivating, is being able to stay in the moment and not get caught up in this whirlwind of ideas, thoughts, and beliefs, and basically to like treat things as sacred and be open-minded about it and reflective.
So we're supposed to talk about what motivates us, right?
And how to stay motivated.
How to stay motivated.
Because I saw that as a different question too. Because for me, it's easier to get motivated. A lot of times I get very excited about something. I'm like, all right, cool, I'm gonna do this, let's do it. And I spend a few hours a day, 2 days, a week, a month, you know, doing something. And then ironically, and then like it fizzles out. Ironically, I actually wrote a book called called Motivation to Mastery.
Oh,
and so I have, yeah, it's a good title, right? Not to toot my own horn. But I had this system that I created because I love to learn all sorts of things. So I kind of have a system where when I want to take something really seriously and learn it thoroughly, I create like my own class for it, basically. So I give myself modules and I say, okay, for each module, so I did this for drawing and martial arts, for instance. So for drawing, I'll say if I want to draw the human body, the first module is going to be the torso, next is going to be arms, next is legs, hands, head, stuff like that. And so, and I put them in order, and then each one will be like, draw 20 torsos from front view, side view, and back view. Watch 3 videos about drawing the torso. You know, I have like a list of assignments I have to do. And then the final thing I usually do is teach what I've learned. So I'll often make a video and put it on YouTube. That's kind of how I like to do it, but it could be writing a blog post or however. But basically, if you know it well enough to teach it, then okay, you probably kind of grasp the concept. That's my idea. So I came up with this cool system and it really worked well for me. And I was like, okay, cool. Let me like try to share this with people because maybe other people will benefit from it. And what I found in starting to talk to people and share with a few people, and I had a couple people read the book, is that, or the first phase of the book, was that it was like people would be like, all right, cool. And then they wouldn't do anything. And I'm like, well, there must be something you want to learn, or there must be something you want to improve on, or that you'd be excited to get better at. But I was like, okay, so it's not really the system of how to learn that's the problem. It's the motivation. Like if people don't, you know, I'm noticing a lot of people don't actually feel very motivated to go into something and fully invest themselves in developing a skill and doing the work to get to where they want to be in that skill kind of thing. And so I was like, okay, let me look at the motivation side of it. And so I'll have a couple thoughts about that, which I could share. But basically what I was saying to begin with is I wrote this whole book, I got very excited, and then I didn't do anything with it. So like getting motivated was easier because I was like, oh, cool, I have these ideas, I'll do it. But then staying motivated, I feel like is actually a different topic, or it has a different something to it.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious if you've had that experience, or if you have any thoughts on the difference between getting motivated and staying motivated.
I've been asked that question so many times.
Oh, really?
So many
Okay.
different people. And I think,
No way.
I think it's really a question which is not easy to get answered. That's why people keep asking it. Like you say, you get highs because
Yes.
you get something that you're really into, you do it, and then it flattens. And this is how life is in general. And for example, if you take like, for example, love, okay? Someone falls in love with someone else. Usually the brain chemicals, they stay in the body around 4 to 6 months, and then it fades, all right? And then you work on the relationship. There's still appreciation, but that high, you never get it, okay? And some people look for that high in other things in their life because they just want that high. So in real, we can't stay on that high, right?
Yeah.
And the Stoics actually explained that in a workshop. The Stoics thought about it like, what's the thing we can hold on to? What's that
Mm.
thing that is actually real among that world of chaos? And they try to dissect it. So they say, okay, we have our thoughts. Sometimes we have good thoughts, sometimes we have negative thoughts. So we can't really rely on thoughts, right? And
Mm.
then
Fair.
you take feelings. Sometimes you have very good feelings, and sometimes things are not good around you. You start to have feelings which are not so good towards yourself or others. So we can't rely on feelings, right? And then the same thing about emotions. The same thing about your body. You can't always rely on your body. Sometimes your body doesn't want to do that thing because it doesn't feel good. So what's really that thing that cuts through all that confusion or instability? And what they really came up with was that it's reason. So if
Mm.
you really develop your reasoning
Yeah.
skills, that's the one thing which will cut through everything. So, for example, let's say someone is going through a heartbreak, all right, or a betrayal, or something very nasty, or divorce, something very bad.
Mm.
You feel bad, okay? Uh, let's say your psychologist tells you that no, it's okay, you don't need to feel that way and all that. No, it's not going to change anything. You feel bad,
Yeah.
with the betrayal. So
Because that's what I was going to ask. Like, reasonably, you might be like, well, feeling bad doesn't actually make me less betrayed, but you
exactly,
still feel that way.
you
So,
feel
okay,
that
go
way.
on. I'm
Yeah,
curious where you're going with this.
yeah. So the Stoic will tell you that yeah, you feel that way. You have to feel that way. It happened, right? Life is suffering,
Okay,
and then
sure.
if you realize that okay, you're feeling that way because there's something happening in your brain. So you won't always
Mm.
feel that way. So right now, there has been betrayal. So the chemicals in your brain are telling you that you do need to feel bad. And possibly you created, let's say, okay, what is basically betrayal? So it's like trust has been broken, right? Or
Okay.
you fantasize, so you created like a the perfect image of the person, but the person was not that person, right?
Okay.
So
Sure.
you feel bad about it because possibly you feel that you are not good at judging people. So all these things are going through your
Mm.
mind right now, and you
It's
feel
almost like
bad.
your brain or you is like punishing you. Like, okay, don't
Exactly.
do that again. Like, learn from your
Yeah.
mistake. You gotta
So
feel bad
so
so
it's
you'll
good.
remember.
So feeling
In a
bad is
way,
good
okay.
actually because it's making you
Interesting.
feel like shit because it's only through this way that you're not going to do it again. You're not going to trust someone easily like that
Mm.
again. So you realize that, okay, I'm feeling this way. It's important I feel bad, actually. Let it take its time, okay? And at the same time, you realize that, it's the game of the mind. Your body's feeling this way because you need to learn a lesson. Once you
Mm-hmm.
start to use reason to actually tell yourself, okay, I'm feeling bad, yeah, but it won't last the whole time. And it's just my mind playing tricks. I missed the person, but I'm not really missing the person. The person betrayed me. Let's use reasoning, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The person
Mm-hmm.
betrayed me, so it's useless thinking about the person. Why am I thinking about the person where the person just shot me and moved on? So why am I thinking about that person? I should just move on. So that's your reasoning now, trying to compensate for that feeling bad and feeling rejected and all that. And the more you play that game of reasoning, you're going to control those emotions.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was also trying to express with the idea of being self-reflective.
Mm,
Of like instead of being like these feelings are just seeing it from that perspective, like using the reason, I guess would be
yeah.
the faculty with which we're able to look at our own feelings from a little bit of a distance and say, okay, what are the reasons for the feelings? And okay,
Yeah.
is that actually how I want to proceed?
Mm-hmm.
That's so interesting. And also what you said about falling in love, now that I think about it, I feel like those bursts of motivations, those highs, as you put it, is basically falling in love, but falling in love with like something new that
A
you're
new
learning
project, a
or
new
something
idea.
new. Exactly. It's not so different than falling in love with a person. Perhaps maybe not as powerful, or there's nuances, but it's that same like energetic rush, motivation. You want to spend all your time doing this, like you want to spend all your time with the person in the beginning of the relationship, and then at some point you're like, oh, this project is a little harder than I thought, or oh man, I didn't get as much good feedback as I wanted, or this thing is frustrating me when I thought it was going to be smooth. And then, the reality sets in and you don't get that high again. So it's like, okay, well, how do you stay motivated? And also, when do you know to stay motivated? Because another thing that I've had is like I've kind of pushed projects where I'm like, oh, this should be good. Let me keep pushing it. And then eventually I either burned out or felt like, actually, I'm not into that, or I don't want to do this. And it could be just said that like, okay, yeah, I just kind of lost motivation at that point. But so one of the main thoughts I had about, I was like, okay, what do I think about motivations? And one of the main frameworks that I feel is very simple and it feels very true to me is that there's basically two kinds of motivation. One that's I kind of feel like it's one that's the pulling and then the pushing. So are you being pulled towards something, like something's attracting you and you're moving towards it, it's something that you want, it's something that you're excited about, or is the pushing, on the other hand, is something you're moving away from, something you don't want and that you're afraid of, or you're avoiding consequences, and that's what's motivating you. And so I'm trying these days to be less, because I would think like, oh, I want to find success in this way, or I want to do something that's helpful or valuable to people, right? And I thought this was something that was pulling me, but in a tricky way. I think actually I was being pushed by the desire, or like the fear of not being significant, not being of value in the world, not having meaning. You know what I mean? I was trying to avoid these feelings or these existential crises by saying, okay, I've got to create something that's valuable and unique and that's going to, bring value to the world in a way that I'm choosing to see as valuable. That's the other thing. You never know. I think another thing Ashley would say is like, just you being in your existence, you as you are, is already creating the max, like is already providing all the value that you could ever expect to bring. And on some level, I believe that, like you are naturally valuable, and it's not like a quantifiable thing where some people are more or less valuable, but you often don't see the effects of what you're doing or understand them on a bigger picture. But yeah, so it can be tricky. So like now, the strategy I'm using a little more, and this is another thing I learned from Ashley, he's here in spirit, and he would be. He's some metaphysical being just in that chair right next to you, that empty mic. I feel like his soul, higher self is sitting right there. And he's telling me that that to follow your excitement, and that your excitement is actually like your higher self or your deeper self or your inner wisdom prompting you towards what the path that would bring out your true expression, or your greatest value, or something like that, if you want to put it that way. And not be so outcome oriented, like we've talked about earlier, where actually following your excitement, say, oh, I'm excited about doing this right now, I don't have to know where it's leading, let me just follow that pull, and let it take me where it's going to be. And it might be a bit of a winding river, there might be some rapids, who knows, but I'm, instead of swimming upstream and trying to say that I need to be over here, kind of following that flow of life. So that's where I've kind of landed on the motivation side of things, and it feels like I'm less motivated than I have before. But it's just, I think that I'm not pushing as hard, I'm like more trusting and allowing the path to show itself, I suppose.
I would say all of these things are correct, and at the same time, we can't just rely on feelings also to do the right thing. Like, for example, let's say, okay, let's go back to reasoning once again. So we can write down on paper what are the things which are going to make our lives better. All right. Like for me, I have like 5 things I stick to the whole time, and that's through reasoning. Okay. I mean, it's through logic that that exercise is very important, meditation is very important. Okay. It's just pure logic. Now, some days the body doesn't
What
want
are
to
the 5?
exercise.
Can we go through the 5 quickly?
Oh,
It was
yeah, sure.
exercise, meditation.
So
I know family and friends.
professional work.
Oh, yes.
Meditation. physical exercise, research, and then it
Research.
used to be family friend time. And I've kind
Okay.
of tweaked it and made it like
Hmm.
time I spent with my son to make him study because it's a priority right now. It's still family time, but
Okay.
it just has a different focus now.
I feel like because I feel like the other four are applicable to anyone, and but the fifth one too, if you just say like something about like connecting with other people,
Could
connecting
be
with the
that,
people who
yeah,
are important in your life.
yeah,
So for you right now, that's going to be your son, like you're saying. But like
yeah,
for anyone, like figure out who's important in your life,
yeah,
and then make it a priority to actually connect with those
yeah,
people,
yeah. And you know, the cool
people.
thing for me is
So that's
that okay,
beautiful.
when I wrote family friend time, to me, everyone is like my family. So,
Beautiful.
so
Yeah.
it's not like local; it's very global. Like
Yeah.
when I'm talking to you, it's family friend time right now, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's a
Absolutely.
priority. And even if I'm a mathematician, I don't weigh those things. It's not like one is more important than the other, you see?
Hmm.
So you do treat the five things as very sacred.
Hmm.
And you talk about recovery. Some people have told me that they think I'm always working, I'm always doing things, I don't have time for recovery. But actually, I don't get tired. For example, is it work right now that I'm talking to you? It's not work. To me, it's like
Hmm.
recovery. When I'm doing research, I'm not like getting myself tired. I enjoy it. So when you enjoy the things you're doing, you don't really need recovery in a sense. Now, there are bad days at the office, right? Where things don't go well. You need to relax a bit. But most of the time, I think I'm cruising. So I don't really need that time out, sit on the sofa and watch TV. I don't need that. So I finish till I wake up at 4 or 4:30 till 10 p.m. I'm on those five things. I don't have time where I'm doing something else.
What comes to me when you're saying that is the idea of doing something from with an idea, even if you part of you wants to do it, but if there's a sense of like obligation, right or wrong, I don't know what the word is exactly, but that sense of like, oh, I kind of have to do this and I have to
Mm,
do it a certain way. Then it feels like something you need recovery from.
yeah,
But if you can just
frustration.
show up and be like, I'm relaxing. Like I'm talking. I don't
Yeah,
have to say anything especially wise. I
yeah,
don't have to do something a certain way or do it, then it's like, oh, well then, yeah. Then at that point, I'm going to be completely relaxed and just able to, exist,
exactly.
basically,
Yeah.
exist in this situation. But it's not any different than existing in any other
Yeah.
circumstance or situation.
All right. I think I know what's the thing that really can help to maintain motivation.
Okay.
And that thing is being yourself the maximum you can. So if you're really yourself, let's say at work, sometimes, like for example, for me, there's admin work I don't quite enjoy, but you have to do it. But
Yeah.
when I'm in a lesson and speaking to the kids, I will just connect whatever thing we're doing, calculus to quantum physics and what's happening to the universe. So it's really me,
Yeah.
you see? So it's being myself
Okay.
there. So I just feel energized. And right now I'm
Yeah.
talking to you, once again, that energy is really high. When I'm
Yeah.
exercising, I'm still thinking about philosophy and all that. So the more you're yourself in the different aspects of your life, the motivation just is there. You don't need to say, "Oh, I need to get motivated." No, just there. And
That's so
that's
true.
I think that's the key. I don't know. That just pop up when we were talking.
No, I mean that resonates with me so strongly. And so the only resistance that comes up is like, okay, why is it like you're always technically yourself, of
Yeah,
course, right? But people know what you're talking about when they say be yourself, right? Like it's
yeah,
like there's some natural, easy, effortless,
mm,
just ask like way that you could be or are,
yeah,
and it's not always the way that you outwardly behave, right?
mhm,
As a
yeah,
general rule, most people have
mhm,
different personas, masks, like parts of themselves they show, parts of themselves they hide. If you could just show up fully and not be, concerned that you is going to be, and I think that's what, okay, so what just came to me is that when you're fully yourself, then if you're rejected or if you do something wrong or if you know get that, then it could cut a lot deeper.
Yeah.
Because it's like you're being your true self. Like if you're like acting the way you think you should, and someone says you do something wrong, you're like, okay, well then I'll act a different way.
Yeah.
But it's like there's like almost like that armor of your social mask, your persona that keeps anything from cutting too deeply.
Yeah.
And the only thing that I would think, and it's weird because I feel like, yeah, you don't take things personally. If other people reject something that's truly you, then that's more on them than anything reflective negatively of you. But the other thing too is to embrace, if you can. This is one thing one of your videos mentioned about, I think it was about practicing detachment, and I found it super helpful. It was a short video, but basically one of the things you said is, I'm going to be paraphrasing, is to let yourself feel that emotion. You know, and not to label the emotion as negative or something I need to escape, not to like push yourself away, like, oh, if I feel embarrassed, if I feel, you know, hurt, it's like, okay, I feel embarrassed and hurt, like, ooh, that hurts, that feels like that, oh, I don't like that, you know, and just like, but that's okay, like, it's just an experience, like you were saying, reasonably, logically, it's gonna pass. There's some kind of reason to it, there's some underlying good intention at least behind your body or your physiology doing this, and your mind. So yeah, it's like, yeah, okay, be yourself. If you can just do that without any reservation, self-consciousness, just bring your full self to everything, I think you're right, where this would be this sense of ease, though there might be even a more rich emotional experience, both positive and negative and positive in quotes.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, that's super interesting.
That's quite deep. And true. I mean, anything you try to repress kind of finds a way to pop its head in a very negative way. So that's one thing. And why do we not express ourselves the whole time? Because I think we're possibly scared of judgment or how people will perceive us, things like that. And yeah, I mean, we are human beings and we feel things, right? And the feelings are there to teach us something about ourselves, sometimes about others. And okay, feeling is something, feeling the emotions and not denying them. And then overacting over them also, that's something else. Some people just overact and dramatize, then that's not helpful. Especially if you're at work and you dramatize, it doesn't help anyone. But feeling hurt is important, like we said. If you felt hurt, then it means there's something wrong. And people who deny or try to push it aside, like, and I've seen it, for example, in case of bullying or verbal abuse. Okay, so if someone shouts to someone else or makes a comment which is not appropriate, let's say, it has becomes like a sort of social norm where people kind of accept it. No, that's just the way he or she talks, you know. Let's just get on with it. And we accept that, and it creates like a sort of unhealthy way of communicating. So if you do feel that something is not right, you need to talk about it. And maybe there won't be a solution, but the fact that you talk about it, that's important. And now you said about feeling and expressing the emotion in the moment. I would say that most of the time you can do that, but sometimes it can be dangerous if you're dealing with a psychopath, let's say. There is a small percentage of people who have come across who would like wait and find those weaknesses in others. Like, you know, okay, when I say that, it makes the person emotional. Like you really know where to attack that person emotionally. And then they will say those things to actually damage the other person because you know it will hurt when you say that. So there are people like that. And now opening up to people like this and showing your emotions will be to your disadvantage because if we just say people, no, you need to express yourself and show emotions, and let's say they're dealing with a bully, that's that's not going to be a
No,
good
yeah,
idea.
see, I don't know necessarily about because the expressing, because what I'm thinking is like to express it or feel it within yourself, to like acknowledge it within yourself fully and let yourself feel it, even if it's in private. Because again, like you can't, like you're saying, other people are outside of your realm of influence. So
Yeah.
you can't control how they'll react. And like you said, they're definitely toxic or unhealthy, people out there who are going to maybe take advantage or just not respond in a way that'll help the situation as far as you'd like. But to be like, but even so, I was thinking like if someone was saying something to hurt you and if you felt fully empowered to be yourself and to not hide anything, I would be like, how that what you said really hurt my feelings and I didn't like it. If you felt comfortable enough to be like, I don't like that. I could see how that would kind of break the manipulation game in some way. Because usually it's like they say it and then you act like you smile and pretend it doesn't bother you, but really it does. But the other person knows it bothers you, or you try not to like feel like show any weakness, but they can tell that they're getting to you. Like I feel like that's where the manipulation and that stuff becomes even more toxic. But if you can be like, that was super hurtful. You like, I don't like it when you say that kind of stuff to me. And I'm not going to, like, I don't want to be around you if you're going to say that, for instance. If that's really how you feel, if you are comfortable enough to just be yourself, as we're saying, and just let that show without worrying about, oh, that person's going to react that way, or, oh, that's not socially acceptable way to talk, or, what if they don't receive me right? Like all these things where you're like kind of more worried and put up that, okay, what should I say? What is the right response? It's just like, this is my response. Something about it feels like it brings out an inner strength and like dissipates the those like social games that seem to be happening all over the place. Now I don't know. Obviously, every situation's unique.
Good point.
Just
Um,
thinking out loud.
Sometimes like showing your weakness like in public is actually a great strength.
Oh, I've read about this with leaders. That leaders who can show vulnerability, like it seems like something that leaders shouldn't do, but it actually builds trust and camaraderie. Not as long as there's an appropriate level of it, but like admitting that like like you're human too. We respect that in a way. It's a kind of strength, like you're saying.
What I usually do is that if I'm going through like a situation which is very uncomfortable, I won't overreact in the sense that we get into a fight or whatever, but I will try to express myself as clear as I can be. For example, there have been times where people have like verbally, let's say, stabbed me at the places where it hurts the most. All right. So what I actually do, okay, I'll just lay out the way I react, and then you can dissect it. All right.
Okay.
So
I'll get my scalpel.
Yeah. So what I would do would be that, okay, first I will recognize that, okay, that person is very aggressive. That person is very upset. So I would apologize. I would say, okay, maybe I've done something to hurt your feelings. That's why you're acting in such an aggressive way. I'm sorry for that. Okay. So that's the first reaction. So I won't get into the fight. I'll try to assume that maybe I've done something wrong, even if I always try to keep my intent in check. So I know deep inside that my intent has always been good. So
sure,
but
take ownership of what part you may have played.
Yeah, because there's
uncertainty in everything,
right? So sometimes you do good things, but it's not good for people.
Yes, even if your intentions.
That's quite
Oh wow.
possible too.
Okay.
So
All right. So
yeah,
that's
so I
where you
recognize
start.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And then one thing can happen there. The person will feel that, okay, I've messed up. I've actually attacked like a friend, so I shouldn't have done that. And then there's a sort of reconciliation which happens. Okay, so it's a good move to do. Let's say it's not tactical. It's just that that's what I would do, and it seems to be like a good move.
Yeah,
Now,
it can be well received or dissipate the situation kind of.
exactly. Now
Mm-hmm.
the second thing which can happen, which happened with me recently, is that the person will attack more.
Okay.
Okay, then you know, okay,
Because they're like, oh, I haven't broken him yet. I gotta
exactly,
hit harder.
yeah.
Okay, that's
So
nasty,
that's
but
what I was telling you. That's where you
mm,
recognize the psychopath in the other person.
mm,
Okay, now I do know people who've gone through lots of stuff, and there has been like a sort of psychopath nature in them because of the way people have treated them. All right, so it's sort of fight response. So every time
mhm.
there's stress building up, they'll just stab people around them because that's their way they've been defending themselves. So, and I think that we could help those people by, positive reinforcement, building their self-esteem. But it doesn't always work that way. I've realized that I've spent so much time trying to help people, and it actually doesn't help. So what you do then is that you say, okay, now what you're doing is not correct. Okay, so now, and you can really say how you feel. Okay, now you're breaking my heart. Now you're doing those things. Now you're really hitting at places where you're really doing it intentionally to really hurt me, right? So that's not okay. And then you observe again, and if the person continues to attack, then you know, no, there's something wrong here. And then you say,
Mhm.
okay, thank you, and then you move on
Sure.
because there's
Yeah.
not more you can do, and
Yeah.
that's the way it is.
No, I mean that's like getting back to the subject of motivation. It's like you're motivated to resolve this to find a peaceful, equal like relationship with this person, but there are some factors that are outside of your control.
Exactly.
And that, from what I understand of Stoicism, because I've looked into that and I found it a very positive philosophy, is like one of the big things is look at what you can control and look at what you can't control, and don't try to control things you can't control.
That's the core of it.
That's the core, right?
Yeah.
So if you're able to say, okay, I can control what I've done to this person, I can control how I react to what they're doing. But at some point, whatever the other person is doing, my motivation is to bring a resolution or peace. If I can't have that with this person, I can find the resolution and peace on my own. It's kind of like sticking to what that core is and not trying to manipulate the outside world too much. And then also going back to like how you conduct yourself in like in a professional setting or in your interests in this podcast and things like that, is like you're in control of what you're doing right now, this moment, this podcast, this conversation, not necessarily in control of what will happen in the future. So don't try to manipulate the future because it's really not in your control. Do what you can now to build whatever you're building, and then let that, things that are outside of your control flow around you. Like, have to deal with your energy and what you're putting out there. But yeah, keeping that attention on what you're doing, I think. And then that goes back to what we said about being yourself.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to: being yourself, controlling your own energy, or not even controlling, but embracing your own being and energy, and knowing your own motivations, sticking with that. I think
Exactly. I
that's
mean,
like a
yeah,
powerful thing.
you're very right. And okay, when we take that story, I never thought that I would actually give so much detail about that thing. But when we talk about that
Mm.
story, which actually really happened, what we realize is there was no hiding of emotions. So I fully communicated how I felt, right?
Okay, yes.
Okay, so that happened. but deep inside, I was broken, like to pieces, because like you receive the stab at the places where they hurt the most, but you have
Yeah.
no idea what I had to listen to.
No, I
So
mean, it's always someone who knows you the best and you trust it, right? And they know what's going to
exactly,
hurt you the most. And I always think like often that's times they're doing it just to hurt you. It's not even
exactly,
necessarily that they mean the thing at the
yeah,
time. It's usually someone who's angry and they're like, I want to get a negative or emotional reaction, so I'm going to say this thing that,
exactly,
and it's like, okay, I don't know. It's not a nice thing, but it's also like not something to take personally. It's more that's their problem for being
yeah.
for having that attitude. It
And
doesn't,
you
but
see
it
the
still hurts.
sequence, like a
Yeah.
first stab, you try
Yeah.
to sort it out. A second stab, you try to sort it out. A third stab, then you know,
Uh-uh.
we need to be careful
Yeah.
there. So
That's
you can
fair.
still use reasoning even if you're completely broken inside in a
Mm.
given situation.
Hmm.
Because let's say you don't do that and you get into that argument where, for example, you do the same thing, then you actually cross the line, then you go to that place where maybe it's very hard to come back. And I'm just going to
Mm.
reference the Batman once again. There is a line which he doesn't cross because he knows that if he starts killing, if he crosses that line, they may not be stopping because he's got so much, um, let's say, revenge or whatever happened to his parents.
Yes.
He's got that raw energy. If he goes to the other line, he won't be able to use it for good. He will just maybe turn into something he can't stop. So that happens to
Mm.
people also. The moment, I said that the other day, the moment you hurt someone, you're killing part of yourself, you're killing your soul. And the more you hurt people, the more you kill your soul. And the more you actually become that person who suffers, can't be himself or herself or itself, whatever. But you kill a part of you when you hurt others because others and you actually just one. You're connected.
It's that mirror too.
Yeah,
I feel like it's like what you're doing to the other person, you're doing to yourself.
yeah,
It's almost
yeah,
yeah. Um, you can't really inflict suffering from a place of joy. Like you have to
exactly.
have like that suffering inside of you to try to put it in someone else, even.
Yeah,
And whether or not it succeeds, you're going to succeed in hurting yourself in some way. So I like what you're saying, like killing your soul is another powerful way to put that, man.
yeah, yeah. Oh man,
Man, this conversation took a dark turn though.
was it dark? I mean,
Well, I mean, obviously everything's from you have your perspective, but motivation usually feels like, okay, this is like, bringing you towards something you're excited about. And
yeah,
now,
yeah.
now we're talking about actually avoiding something that's scary. So
But
it's
but but
interesting
it's
how
keeping motivation in the hard times because the first
that's a
principle
good
of Buddhism
perspective.
is that life is suffering. That was the first noble truth taught. So
Okay.
I mean, there was a reason why the Buddha started his teaching with that, like life is suffering. I think
Mhm.
in Jewish religion also they are quite dark, the
Mm.
doctrine
Yeah.
from what I understood, and I think it's because it's a core part of life. I mean, if you deny it when you're faced with it, you collapse. Like, for example, that story I told you, if I wasn't someone who practices spirituality, let's say, I would not cope with it the same way. I would be completely destroyed, maybe, isn't it?
Mm.
And you'll need other
Yeah.
sort of coping mechanism. But
Mm.
the reason why when it happens, it's like, yeah, I was waiting for it to happen someday because life is suffering, right? So that's the first thing that hits my mind. And then you go through that phase where you try to sort yourself out because your trust is broken, you believe it's broken, then you need to build yourself up. But it's not as bad as someone else who would be like on ground level and hardly
Mm.
pulling things up. Like for example, no one would know it happened to me, right? It's just like right
Mm.
now in the context, I'm explaining it because it's relevant to the context. But yeah, it is part of life, and I think okay, once again on motivation, if we acknowledge that suffering is a core part of life, we really accept it, we actually can stay motivated, because when these things happen, we'll keep going because we knew they would happen. So those who are too positive, they cling to happiness and all those good things. They actually can't stay motivated actually when bad things happen, because they didn't want it to happen, right? But when you actually, when you have a good time, you're having a good conversation with someone, you enjoy it. When bad things happen, you cope with it. And I mean, David Goggins will say that you enjoy that being punched also. Okay, that's good also. I mean, you can have that sort of dog mentality in you where you enjoy those bad things happening to you. You could, or you could just cope with it and learn the lesson and move on.
And so, yeah, no, it's amazing how perspective changes things. You can be like, all right, this is a chance for me to get tough, you know, and if I want to be tough and strong, then I need someone to try to break me so that I can overcome it.
Yeah.
If you come out with that attitude, then actually those challenges might be something that would motivate you or excite you or you'd enjoy on some level. It seems like David Goggins, he puts himself in all sorts of situations where he's what anyone else would consider suffering.
Yeah.
And he's like, he willingly and wantingly puts himself into those. I think I heard on a podcast, he went to some scientific study, and he was a test subject on fear. And he went and told the person, like, they're asking, okay, what are your phobias? Because we want to, like, we're going to test stuff out. And he's like, okay, I think he said that he's afraid of sharks, right? So he's like, I'm super afraid of sharks. And then like, all right, we're going to put you guys in the shark simulation. Who wants to go first? And his hand goes up right away. He's like, you know, he's like, all right,
bring it on.
Like, he almost like, I told you I'm afraid of sharks because I want you to send a shark at me because I want to overcome that. That's like, he gets some joy in overcoming that. Yeah. So it's amazing how like this, I feel like your perception, your perspective is the biggest thing that shapes your experience, right?
Exactly. I mean, once you embrace what you're scared of, that's what liberates you. And once again, that's what the Batman did. He was scared of bats. And there is a powerful scene in Batman Begins. I don't know whether you've watched it, but he goes into that cave and you have all the bats around him. And he's in that victim position where he's a bit like this. And then he gets up, he opens his chest and he opens his arms and you see all the bats around him. And it's like perfect harmony with what you're really scared of. That's super powerful.
That's intense.
Because you embrace your fear. And that's another stoic exercise as well. You visualize every day all the worst things which happen to you. All the abuse, the physical, the verbal abuse, your heart being broken, manipulation. I don't know what you went through. You visualize all these things. It's going to be very hurtful at the start. The more you do it, you start to get this sort of strength. You say, oh, I can actually cope with that. And you'll see the emotions reduce the more you do it, till one day it flows through your mind and you hardly move. And once you reach that level, nothing can break you. And that's what Goggins said. You can't hurt me. I mean, you can try. And actually, I explained that with Damien one day. Perception is logarithmic. So on your x-axis, let's say you've got suffering, and then on your y-axis, you've got response. So the curve does like this. So the more you've suffered, the less you react, actually.
Oh,
so for example, for someone who's been to, let's say, Iraq war, okay, you've lost a leg, you've seen people die in front of you, you've seen children dying. Let's say you come back home and you go through a divorce. It will hardly move you because you've seen more suffering. Like you've on that side, and your response is going to be very low when you're going to something which is minimal to what you survived. So if you really push yourself, you imagine the worst things. And I never realized that, but when I was young, let's say I was 11 or 12, I used to have a sort of dream where I always imagined the worst things happening to me. Like, it's crazy, eh? But like people pushing me off a cliff or trying to kill me. I don't know why I was dreaming about those things, but I always played that in my mind. Sometimes I used to cry in my dreams and all that. But these always played in my mind. And now I realize that somehow my subconscious has been doing that to me, like put me in those worst case
training
scenarios.
you.
Yeah, that's so weird.
Wow.
Yeah,
No, that's
I've never
intense,
said
man.
that live, but it's so weird when I think about it. It's as if that part of you being a stoic, it's always been there, like playing you subconsciously. And now it's something I teach actually. But it's quite fascinating whether we all have those abilities in us, which Jordan
Yeah.
Peterson talks like you expose yourself to a new context and then the new neural paths are created in your brain, right? So
Mm.
we have so much potential in us. It's only by doing new things, by risking that we open up these pathways and we become like new versions of ourselves. It's powerful.
Mm. Yeah. Oh man. It's just the idea of on being a new version of yourself, and this might actually be another powerful way of motivating. And again, here comes Ashley bringing his wisdom in from the spirit, because he's been sharing these books with me, and one of them talks about the idea that if there are these, if like the universe or like reality is infinite in its nature,
Mm,
then that means that every possibility, every version of you in every situation is happening, because again, time as well is kind of more illusionary
yeah,
from like a physics point of view. So it's like is happening in this moment. So
yeah,
instead of like you moving through time, really, you're actually like phasing into different parallel universes that are very similar, but it's like the next version of yourself, or the next another version of yourself just a little later in the timeline.
yeah,
And so it is actually that like you're being reborn, you're a new person
mm,
in every moment, and it's just
yeah,
happening so quick, like the frames on the computer screen on a, they're happening so quick it looks seamless and it feels seamless, but
yeah,
it's actually a whole different version of yourself.
yeah,
So I actually kind of keep that in mind, because I'm like, well, that actually could be the way that reality, and there seems to be a lot of evidence in the quantum physics world and things like that,
mm,
that suggest that reality is maybe more like this, or just on a whole nother level. Like, so if this is true, when I'm like not feeling a certain way and I'd rather be feeling a different way, or if I'm like, even like if I'm having trouble going to sleep or anything, I'm like, well, there's a version of myself that's already asleep right now.
yeah,
So can I just like phase into that version that's already existing in
yeah,
some way? It's like, or if I'm not feeling like super like this, or maybe I'm not feeling motivated, well, there's a version of me that's exceptionally motivated.
yeah,
Like, can
yeah,
I, and I feel like it's almost a matter of perception or awareness to become aware of that potentiality, that version of you that is already there. It's not like you have
yeah,
to change anything, it's just you have to phase into this different reality. And
yeah,
so I'm like, and actually that's been on a practical level more helpful for me than the other strategies where I'll be like, oh, I should feel this way. Or even being like logically,
mm,
it doesn't make sense for me to feel this way, this, and or I want to choose to feel this way. Some reason those don't seem to have as much power as like, oh, this way already exists. Can
yeah.
I tap into it?
Can you tap
So
into
it's
it?
just a little life hack. I don't know if it would work for other people. I'd be curious, but I thought I would
Yeah.
share it. Yeah.
Ooh, that was a good talk.
It's a trippy one.
Yeah,
So wait, before we wrap up, I kind of want to ask you one question,
yeah,
because I'm curious how you'd answer. It's kind of silly. It's what I, cause when I was writing this motivation to mastery book, I was trying to figure out like the essence of, well, why are we motivated to do anything? Like, why don't we just sit here unmoving, just completely neutral and passive? Like,
mm,
it takes motivation to go grab a cup of water, use the bathroom, go, anything takes some kind
yeah,
of level. So I was like, okay, it gave me the idea of what I call the magic rock. It was like a little thought exercise. So imagine you're a rock in a forest somewhere. You're an ordinary rock. You can be whatever size you want. And you've just been sitting there for whatever hundreds of thousands of years the rock can sit there. And then one day you find that you're actually able to move. You
mm,
become sentient, and you could roll around, you could move, you could do something.
yeah,
But you could also just continue to sit there as the rock in one position.
yeah.
So my question would be, if you were that rock and that happened to you, would you remain in that spot, or would you do something else? And if so, why would you do something else aside from just sit there for eternity?
Yeah. I think human beings are very different in the sense that when we are born, we're thrown into suffering. Um, I mean, when we are a baby, we try to walk, we hurt ourselves, we feel pain. And as we grow up, we experience all sorts of mental trauma, mental suffering. And deep inside, the main motivation, I think, is how do we go beyond the suffering? And that's the motivation. Everything we're trying to do is we're trying to discover ourselves and go beyond that suffering. And everything is based on that. I mean, even people who are trying to accumulate wealth, let's say, they think that is going to solve the problem of their suffering, them feeling like shit, let's say. And to me, that's the motivation, the suffering itself. It's the path. Like, we're always trying to find a way to live in a better way. Like even the cavemen, when they discovered fire and they could cook the meat and it was more tasty, they were just trying to minimize the suffering by eating better, let's say. And even for me, if I look at all the things I do, these things keep me balanced and keep me away from a state of suffering. So to me, the main motivation is suffering itself. So life is suffering, whether you agree or no. And since you know it is suffering, you need to do your best to minimize it. So how do you minimize suffering? You optimize the quality of your life. And the moment you stop doing that, you're going to get more suffering in you. Now, you either do this or you're in complete denial, like everything sucks, life is not fair, and then you develop a sort of addiction to something so that you face the reality less and less. You could do that too, to stay away from the suffering, but it doesn't work.
But like you said though earlier too, the suffering, like when you think about it reasonably, now that I'm almost thinking like, why wouldn't people just sit there and not do anything? And you're saying, well, suffering motivates us to move away from that.
Yeah.
So that's an intrinsic motivator. Like even the Buddha wanted to, the original what is his name? Bodhidharma or Gautama
Gautama was
Siddhartha.
the original one, yeah.
Okay, yes. He was, the reason he became this enlightened figure is because he saw suffering and it made him feel suffering.
Yeah.
Like before he was like a prince, right? And he didn't suffer at all. And he probably didn't do much. He probably just laid around, not doing too much. Then once he saw the suffering and was affected and started suffering himself, he was like, okay, now I'm motivated to overcome this. And in doing so, achieve what he achieved, of course.
Through the suffering.
Phenomenal. It's through the suffering.
Yeah.
Then on the other hand, though, too, because I think that's like what I said is like the push. The most fundamental push would be to get away from suffering, just to simplify it, right? That's pushing you in a motivating way. And then I think we also hit on what's pulling you, which I think is becoming and being and embodying your true self.
Yeah.
Because I think when you hit on that was a pretty mind-blowing moment for me, because I think that is really like a deep sense of motivation of what pulls you.
Yeah.
So it's a two sides. Like you want to minimize suffering while moving towards
and you want to
your
optimize
ultimate nature, your ultimate self. And
you want to optimize being yourself too while minimizing the suffering. That's cool.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Wow, man, this was a pretty awesome talk.
It was.
A pretty
enlightening.
I'm very excited about the insights we've had.
Yeah. It was great.
I think
and you don't realize, but you actually pulled things that maybe I would have never said to anyone else, like these personal things which happen with the details, like the stages and all that. I mean, I never talk about those things, but it just felt like, it was really in the context. And
it's in the context and in the spirit.
Open and raw without being insulting, aggressive. It just, okay, that's happened and you're laying it out, and It's cool.
almost taking that self-reflective third person perspective of yourself, like I was trying to,
Yeah.
like I was chatting about
And you
before.
realize when I say all those things, I don't get carried away. They're like no
Yeah.
emotions. They're
Yeah,
already
yeah.
out. And
Yeah, no, you
that's so
can tell
cool.
you're looking at it and you're almost analyzing
Yeah,
something that's happened to you, almost like you saw it on a TV show,
exactly.
where you're like, it's like almost like that's a fictional character that you're learning
Yeah,
from.
yeah.
Because in a way, maybe it is. If you're phasing into these different realities, that reality is almost has nothing to do with you. He just looks like you share memories, but it's not you in this moment.
But that's what the truth is. Like things happen, right? Me and you talking, we are talking, there's information. And then there are emotions generated by me, by you, and that's how we interpret the experience. Like, we felt good talking about it and all that. But if you look at it very objectively, there's transfer of information, and that's it.
Mhm.